Hey, my name's ShawNshawN. I do art on ShawNshawN.co and specials on eBay. Today we're going to review The Intruder. So The Intruder is a film by Dion Taylor. It's only an hour and 42 minutes. Really, good timing as wise. It stars Dennis Quaid as kind of Charlie Peck, this bizarre homeowner. And the young couple that buys his house are Megan Good, played by Annie Russell, Michael Ealy, playing Scott Russell, her husband, and Joseph Sikora playing Mike, his Scott Russell's partner at work. So this young black couple, he just makes Scott just makes this really big sale at the company, surprise birthday party. The wife's like, hey, I kind of want to start a family, but we're in the city in San Francisco. It's very not that urban. I used to live in San Francisco, but anyway, too urban for them, right? They're showing them the downtown part of San Francisco, which it exists, but you can move literally to within San Francisco, and it's very residential. So, but if you haven't been to San Francisco, you wouldn't know this, so I think they're playing with that. So she wants to move to the countryside, so Napa area, Sonoma. So they're scouting for houses. They settle on this house by Charlie Peck, who's had the house for generations, which you're kind of scratching your head like, why is this guy selling the house if it's been in his family generations? You're like, okay, whatever. So they buy the house, start redecorating, and then this Charlie Peck guy, he keeps showing up for Thanksgiving. He wants to redecorate the house. He's supposed to be moving to Florida to his daughter, and they keep like, why does this guy keep showing up? And the husband's getting pissed off because he feels like he's stalking the family. And in certain scenes he kind of shows up inside the house at night, and then he's not inside the house, and you're like, is he inside the house? He's not inside the house. And so Charlie actually suggests to him, hey, there's teenagers in the back of your yard. Some people, they go hunting back there, or teenagers go to make out. So they install a security system and all this, but still Charlie's showing up, and they're just like, what the hell's going on, And then it turns out Charlie has like this really bad past where his wife died of cancer, but she didn't die of cancer. The daughter's estranged. So that's kind of the unraveling of Charlie, and then where the story kind of hits the climax in the story. It has a lot of similarities from other films. Some of the climax scenes where there's kind of like Charlie and the family go head to head are straight out of The Shining. They have an axe scene that's straight out of The Shining. They have the knife scene that's kind of straight out of The Shining. The axe scene's more in a different place, but kind of a similar feel where the guy that comes to rescue the family is axed. Exactly like in The Shining, right? Except instead of instead of a white family and the black guy comes to save it, it says black family and the white guy comes to save it, right? So kind of funny. It's also similar to this other film. It slips my mind. Suburbia or something, Suburbia, or I don't know. About this crazy next door neighbor who has this underground passageways and is hacking people up, right? So it has a little bit of those elements mixed in with The Shining a little bit. Shining Light, I would say. It doesn't have any of the paranormal. The characters are pretty normal except for one, Charlie. So yeah, I think that's kind of what's missing in this film. I really appreciate that they bring kind of this new generation of films where there's more films for African Americans in normal parts versus kind of the fringe parts that they've normally played. They normally play kind of token parts, where in a horror film they're probably the first to be killed off, probably with a majority white cast, and the token black guy gets killed off. So in this case, it's about a black family, but then they have a couple of white actors that kind of balance it out. So I appreciate that they're bringing representation, positive views for black families, so they can take their families and be like, oh, this is kind of a normal family, and this is what happens when you have this crazy white dude showed up, right? But on the other hand, you need, especially in a horror film, you need flawed characters. Like, for example, like in The Shining, which is obviously one of the greatest horror films ever made, but, Jack is flawed. He's kind of this author who wants to write a book, and then he's kind of like off, and he has his special powers, but he doesn't even know about it, and the hotel starts to kind of take over and possess him. His son has the same powers, but is more cognition of his powers. The wife is kind of this, fragile wife. She doesn't really stand up to the husband so much, so it's kind of like these really very flawed characters. So they make for a really great character arc as, Wendy goes from a very kind of passive wife to a very strong woman that saves her son in the end. And the son goes from kind of this normal kid, he gets traumatized, and he becomes kind of the playing piece between the husband and wife, right? And Jack obviously loses his complete mind. So in this case, you have the husband and wife. They're normal at the beginning. They're basically normal at the end. The partner shows up. He's kind of normal. He's killed off, but he's basically normal. Even the the villain, Dennis Quaid, who plays kind of this crazy house owner, you don't really see... You see a little bit of transition, but not much. So I think the flaw in this movie really is there's not much character arc. And for a movie to be successful, you have to have a character arc where they have their challenges and they overcome them, or they get overwhelmed by them. So you can have some characters die off and everything. That's normal in a horror film, but you need kind of this transition. A lot of horror films have this issue where, they're just kind of sloppy. I mean, not sloppy, but they're kind of goofy and you're not taken seriously because there's a lack of character arc. And a lot of the, I'd say 90% of horror films have this issue. It's not just this film. So it's a fun film. Nothing brainstorming. It'll make you think twice about buying an old house, perhaps. I know when I saw my first old house scary horror film, I was freaked out because I just bought an old house. And it has kind of weird elements, like a coal chute that you don't use anymore. It's been welded shut, but you're like, that's a secret entrance to the house someone can break in. You got caps in the wall where people can slip in and out if they're really skinny, which the cats did. So there's a lot of creepy elements to this house that I live in right now. So, and like there's secret doorway kind of passageways in the house a little bit. So it definitely creates that element of... if you see a film like this, it might spook you out. But I think I'm getting more used to the house, per se. They just use straight up, the main action scenes of the film, which is the climax, they're taken straight out of The Shining. You're like, dude, this is lazy director. I mean, it's nice that he takes kind of a homage to Kubrick. And then, The Shining's shot in the 70s, so it's way later. So most people growing up, especially teenagers, anyone under 20 probably have seen The Shining. So this would be a highly effective film in that sense. But yeah, it's just kind of, But I think the scenes make sense that they use. They also use another scene where Scott gets hit by a truck. And that's kind of also a Stephen King moment, because Stephen King himself got hit on a country road by a truck. So... And in one of his novels, Pet Sematary, the kids get run over by the truck. So you're like, is this a kind of a stealing from Stephen King and then just thrown into, reworked? Makes you scratch your head a little bit. I think to improve the movie, what I would have done is have more of a crisis at work, probably for Scott. He does have a little bit. He has a challenge of one of the business partners that works with the firm. He's a marketing firm, so they, pitch out to these large companies that want to do their advertising. And she comes to the company. She's kind of trying to seduce him. So there's a little bit of a crisis there, a little bit in the film. So they have a little bit of that element, but not much. The wife's a little suspicious, but I think what partly doesn't work for me is the wife is always kind of this good reaction to Charlie. And I mean, it's partially just defense. I mean, how are you going to defend yourself? You're a woman by yourself in the middle of the country. You're going to be kind of easygoing and approach people that way. That's, a good way to survive as a woman. So, I mean, her reactions aren't unrealistic. But yeah, I think they could have worked in a little creepier elements, maybe eyes behind the wall, or of course that would have given away kind of the end of the film if they had done something like that. But I did like some of the use they did with smoking. So the partner, Mike, of Scott Russell, he actually is a smoker, and so he's smoking in the backyard and throws a cigarette out in the backyard. And of course Charlie's like, I hate this guy, he's ruining my lawn, So that has kind of a nice aspect, especially because California is very anti-smoking. So this, if you're a Californian, most of the country's gone anti-smoking at this point. So that has a really strong element of disrespect for the property itself. They take down the rug, which is another disrespect. I think they could have worked the rug scene a little more, like saying it was in the house generations. They do say it was his gift to him, but they don't say maybe it was a generational rug or something, or the special meaning behind the rug. Yeah, I thought it wasn't bad. Maybe they needed more actors to kind of pull into the plot. It has kind of a simple cast, which is fine, but I think with a few more cast members, they could have kind of pulled in. One of the things I might have done is reshoot. They talk about Scott, he doesn't like guns, and so he's always like, keep guns off my property. And this guy that they bought a house from had several kind of hunting rifles. So, he says his brother got shot in the past. They should have done a flashback scene where they show him as little kids and they're on the street and his kid, and then they show him seeing his brother shot or something traumatic. And that would have really tightened up the end where a gun is used again. And that would have had that nice tension. They just talk about it, and that doesn't have the same traumatic effect as if you visually show it and then you visually show it. Yeah, I think that would have been nice. Also, a little more details on why this guy went crazy. They kind of show it, and they show just enough to kind of hint around and beat around the bushes of why, he got in trouble and had to sell his house off. But maybe a little more specific examples on particular companies, just to give it more of a real feeling of edge. Like maybe they found some lost bills where they showed they're going to foreclose on the house or something. That might have been nice, I think. Yeah, I mean, there's only a few elements you could really kind of tweak the movie out with. I think they did a pretty decent job. But again, like, the lack of character art, which a lot of horror films kind of have that flaw, that just kind of, yeah, there should have been, I think, a little more tension in the marriage as it went on, like a good marriage to like a really tense, they're going to break up and then they come together for the final scene. It would have that more drama would have really played out, I think, a little more. Also, maybe tension between Scott and Mike might have played out more at the film. Like, maybe Mike finds out about the bar scene or something. I don't know. Yeah, it's a pretty decent horror film, just your average, nice, fun flick. Hopefully you guys like my review. Give me a thumbs up. If you want to subscribe, you can subscribe below. And I'll see you in the next movie review. Thanks for watching, guys.